Good evening and welcome to the LaRouche Movement's weekly battle report. Today is Wednesday, December 31st of 2025. We go into the new year in the midst of tremendous change in the world. In last Friday's discussion of the International Peace Coalition, Mrs. Helga Zepp LaRouche identified that what we're facing today is not merely a collection of regional provocations, though there are many, and they are very real. In just the past week, we saw an assassination attempt against Russian President Vladimir Putin at his home while he was working on negotiations to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. We saw an acceleration of tensions between the United States and China, as the U.S. signed off on $11 billion in weapons to be sold to Taiwan, in a dangerous and direct violation of China's One China policy. We saw continuing suppression of humane conditions of life in Gaza and many other places around the world. In the IPC discussion, Mrs. Zepp LaRouche identified that the ordering principle to it all is that we are seeing an epochal shift of 500 years. Asia and the global majority of mankind are moving forward, almost unstoppably. But the establishment of Western elites have not yet adjusted to the reality that the old order is gone. It's like the man who is used to driving across the same bridge to work every day, and then he goes out to do the same drive one morning, even after receiving news that the bridge has collapsed. The antidote, the source of hope and optimism in this context, and as we go into the new year, 2026, is what we do. We who are committed to creating a movement for peace and development, a movement for policy. We must show leadership, a leadership that will be a combination of courage and the intelligence to organize solutions to the crisis. We have those solutions. And if you look at the LaRouche four-law economic program, which has been pulled together specifically in the United States as a proposed draft legislation for the U.S. Congress, as the America's 250th Birthday General Welfare Act, this is a very developed but clear and concise program for economic recovery. You can find that act at LaRoucheOrganization.com/glass_Steagall. In tonight's report, we're going to cover two items of recent intervention by the LaRouche movement. First, Andrew Laverdiere in Maine has done something wonderful, and then we'll watch an example of the LaRouche movement being appreciated and tapped for insight in an interview done by Diane Sayre. So first to Andrew, up in the state of Maine in the United States. He went to his local city council meeting, and he describes that facing a budget crisis at the county level and a pretty bad homeless situation, his city council, Bangor, had to endure at their recent meeting on December 22nd a lot of complaints by citizens about homeless people. Then Andrew got up to the mic and talked about some solutions, namely to have the federal government reinstate the Glass Steagall Act as law. So let's go now to Andrew.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Andrew Laverdiere. I'm one of the few remaining taxi drivers in this town. I live here. And this petition or this resolution is about the need of, from the national level, something you can do to address the problem because every town in Penobscot County and other counties are facing a budget crisis, mostly because of, like I said, the way the jail right now is running up. Well, it's going over budget because of crime. So this is addressing this issue of, like I said, what's the problem, which is nationally, the economy is run by a bunch of mafioso Wall Street speculators. And the resolution is going back to the, well, it's what Franklin Roosevelt did to deal with the economic depression, because we are, in a sense, in a depression, right? The homeless problem is just like the Great Depression, facing the same thing, lack of, basically the tax revenue base has collapsed because we don't have manufacturing anymore. So this resolution is how you can actually address this problem, because we do have to have a credit system that puts manufacturing back. We have to bring back manufacturing. We have to have a productive economy again, because we don't. And I mean, just the problem of how many old people we have. So it's an untenable situation that's almost like the old metaphor of the Gordian knot, right? Which you can't solve just within Bangor in and of itself, right? You have to have the federal government basically clear the debts, wipe out the speculative debts, and start issuing federal credit that's going to rebuild infrastructure, because heaven knows we need a lot of infrastructure rebuilt. God knows. And through that kind of issuance of federal credit, just like Franklin Roosevelt did with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, you can get a massive burst of reemployment. But hey, that would require, like, a lot of training schools. That's how Franklin Roosevelt dealt with the problem then. So there you go. Basically, this is your Christmas gift, because this is the way you can push the government to go back to a system that, well, it worked. It worked for 60 years until, well, it was destroyed by Wall Street when Clinton signed or repealed the Glass Steagall Act. So there you go. Like I said, there's your Christmas gift. You can act on it. So that's it.
I mean, I personally do support this.
Thank you, Andrew. I thought that was a very, very, very good intervention there. So now we're going to, and also viewers, if you haven't recently done so, please visit your city council or other bodies to get resolutions passed for Glass Steagall and or for the entire economic recovery package. We need the help when we go to the U.S. Congress and elsewhere to show the pressure that there is for these ideas. We need many, many of these resolutions passed. Now we're going to go to one other video clip for this evening. Diane Sayre, former candidate for the U.S. Senate. She gave a live 5-minute interview to RT, the international Russian news agency, a few days ago on December 27th. And the questions were largely about the pervasive corruption of the Zelensky government in Ukraine. But Diane had the opportunity to put in some insights. And though this interview is dated to a few days ago, before this weekend's negotiations, it will show the keen insight of Diane and the LaRouche movement. And I think this is one example. There are many examples, but an example of the LaRouche movement being tapped by news organizations in Russia, in China, in the Middle East, and elsewhere on an absolutely continuing and regular basis for our insights. So now we'll go to Diane.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program, Diane. Thank you very, very much for joining us here and sharing your weekend with us here at RT International. You've just heard the discussion between me and Anastasia as Zelensky plans to meet Trump in the next 24 hours in beautiful Sunshine State of Florida. But there's more corruption news coming out of Kiev, and it's also coming at a time when Zelensky says, sorry, Trump, we got no cash to stage elections. I mean, after these, how many billions of taxpayer dollars and taxpayer euros have gone to Kiev, and now we're having more corruption scandals, no money for elections. Is this a part of a trend, Diane? Help me understand it.
I don't know. I think it might be the American approach to democracy that he's talking about, since we have various election issues here. But I also think, how can you talk about elections in Ukraine when you have 13 or so opposition parties banned? You have millions of Ukrainians outside the country. I don't know what would make any election at the moment actually verifiable. And of course, Zelensky is not actually the legitimate president, since his mandate has been exceeded now for many months.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It was May 2024 when he was de facto no longer the president. So essentially Zelensky is a Ukrainian politician. But, speaking about these almost ever erupting, ever appearing levels of corruption. I mean, they're investigating Zelensky's closest inner circle of friends. Meantime, a man who's very familiar with all of this, Hunter Biden, Diane, he recently came out to call Ukraine a viper's den with a staggering level of corruption. It's curious timing with Hunter coming clean after all these years. Your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't exactly call that clean. I might call it a falling out among thieves. And, I think this is sort of the way Jeffrey Epstein worked, perhaps with powerful political people in the United States. Everyone knows blackmail, so people run their various blackmail operations. Zelensky being corrupt is not a surprise or a mystery. That was known really before this special military operation even was launched. He clearly has not been interested in the well-being of his population. He's more interested in personal enrichment, and therefore willing to do the bidding, particularly of the British, and that's seconded by the various, I would say, treasonous neocon elements of the American intelligence circles, who have been wanting to use him as a pawn in their proxy designs to weaken Russia. To President Trump's credit, I think he's not so happy about that. I think he actually is concerned about a risk of nuclear war, and I remain hopeful that somehow the spirit of the Alaska talks can come through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on the cautious optimism. We're all hoping cooler heads prevail at the end of the day, Diane. So Ukraine, as we know, Zelensky's flying to beautiful Florida in the next 24 hours. He's going to be bringing his own peace plan to Trump. I think you made a very good point about the kind of divide between Trump and his European allies right now. I think Trump's a little bit annoyed with Europe. Trump and Putin are trying to find an end to this conflict. Europe is trying to find a way to pump more money and more cash to Kiev. Do you think in the next 24 hours there's going to be something in this peace initiative that all sides can agree upon?
Well, if you're including the Europeans, no, I don't think there will be something all sides can agree upon. But if President Trump has the fortitude to stick to whatever he and Putin discussed in Alaska, and the plans, at least something of a framework of what was unfortunately leaked a few weeks back, perhaps something can come of it. I'm always a bit leery when Zelensky comes to meet with Trump. I heard that he's not bringing his European entourage. I hope that's the case. That will make it more likely. And I have a question myself, and as you know, the Schiller Institute has asked, and President Putin, can this be resolved outside of discussions for an entirely new strategic and security and economic framework for Eurasia? Really, I think we need to be talking about a new security architecture which takes into account the interests of every nation involved. And I would hope that that's something that President Trump and at least some of his advisors would be willing to consider.
Yeah, that's an intriguing idea. To wrap up our conversation with Diane Sayre, president of the LaRouche organization and former independent candidate for the U.S. Senate. It has been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
All right, with that very interesting interview, we're going to bring this episode to a close, the final weekly battle report for 2025. to recap the most important idea coming out of this and going into the new year as you and I write our New Year's resolutions is that the hope in this situation isn't going to come from what someone else does. The hope is going to come from what we do. It's not a knight in shining armor. It's not waiting until the corrupt people that were frustrated with change and become better people. It's that we become better ourselves and our light will shine upon them and hopefully inspire them, or we get the pitchforks out, including by getting resolutions passed by our city councils and state legislatures, making demands upon the leaders that the situation be changed. So I ask for your help in this process, including that when you do go out and organize, that you film some reports on the ground is best. When you're out there in public, it's much more interesting to see when you can see signs and buildings of importance, or in the case of Andrew, the city council. So please make some of these video reports and send them in. You can reach us at info@LaRoucheorganization.com. And also just to remind that the policy programs, a very good place to find concise material for that and other materials to support your understanding and your organizing. You can go to LaRoucheorganization.com/glass_Steagall. And if you're not sure, again, info@LaRoucheorganization.com. So thank you very much for tuning in. Enjoy your New Year's, and we will